do have a few brief remarks, and then I have the honor of introducing our most special and honored and valued guest, who is Roland G. Downing. But first I want to say just a few words and welcome everyone to the Whaling Museum. The first observation that I want to make is that we are here in our historic district, which is one of the United States' major historic district, from the standpoint of the fight for freedom, as well as the just very first growth of commerce. We are standing in the birthplace of modern America. The advantage we have today is we're in the middle of a holiday week on our way to a school vacation, celebrating Patriots Day, with Good Friday yesterday, Holy Saturday today, Passover going on this past week, Easter tomorrow, and then Patriots Day on Monday. And we are lucky enough to have SAR here, Sons of the American Revolution, here celebrating Patriots Day with us today. We also, though, must acknowledge that while we have an opportunity to learn about history today and see, as every school child in our city will over the next several weeks, as this great event is broadcast, as I was telling the President, this great event will be broadcast over and over and over again on our two and perhaps three networks that we have for the city. The school children will see the dramatic uniforms. They'll learn about the Buffalo Soldiers. They'll learn about the American Revolution and our place in it, as we this morning toured just a very few places that New Bedford was involved. So I take this opportunity to thank you very much for coming and sharing this history with us. The other thing that I want to mention very quickly are the sponsors, and I like General Battles indicated, get a morning email from Eddie Johnson. I look at it and I think to myself, where does he get the time to send these emails each day? But he is a source of information and advice. The Partingways Project Committee, I want to thank very, very much. Well, Wayne Barboza, your remarks were far more eloquent than I could ever express them, and we appreciate very much you being here with us today. The New Bedford Whaling Museum, again, for donating their staff, their space, and the great museum at our disposal. This morning, I do have a few brief remarks, and then I have the honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Val Almeida. The Honorable Mayor Frederick M. Kalish, Jr. His Excellency, the Honorable Jose Brito and his wife, Mrs. Brito. State Representative from Plymouth, Massachusetts, and the first Republican Cape Verdean representative ever, Mr. Vinny D. Macedo. Vinny, would you take the stage? Councilor from Ward 4, Honorable Joseph Jojo Forts. And we will have featured speakers and guests. Those featured speakers and guests includes a dear good friend, poet laureate and professor of UMass Dartmouth, Mr. Everett Hoagland. A person who will be bringing you reflections and a message, Mr. Wayne Ibn Musa Barboza. We will now have the posting of the guards.
Forward, march.
We will now have the national anthem program where a dear friend of mine, a great friend of the late, great Manny Coster, and a friend of yours for many years, professor at UMass Dartmouth, someone that I, along with Wayne Musa Barboza, Ross Grace, and a few others, who journeyed to the Million Man March and came back with a commitment. This is part of that commitment. As you notice, Bridging History with Community, the theme of all of this is history. We now bring you Professor Everett Hogan to recite a poem called Parting Ways.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Ambassador, Mayor Kalis, distinguished and honorable state and local representatives, ladies and gentlemen. You know, back in 1776, many people of African heritage in New England went over to the British side because the British were very forthcoming with regard to freedom after the war. And people in Canada had had a very good record with regard to the Underground Railroad in its early stages. Many, many people of African ancestry went over to the British side. But in Plymouth, Massachusetts, there were 4 men who identified with the ideals of the revolutionary struggle toward a Republican democracy, and for better or worse, invested and tossed their fate in that regard, in that direction. And they are buried at the Partingways Cemetery. And I just think that it's appropriate, before I read the poem that I wrote in the bicentennial year of 1976, to commend the shepherding of the Partingways Project by the pioneering Marge Anderson, and the foresight, the commitment, and the dedication of Eddie Johnson, who has understood that that site and those bones are a core of a model history of an ongoing contribution by a people who have been, in many ways, the Americans, the keepers of the promise of the ideals, beginning in those graves. And I think that before we go any further, we should commend Eddie Johnson for being so determined. You know, that's not all he does. You know, that 6-hour gospel program that he does is an institution. Eddie's an institution builder. You know, you judge people by what they do. And that is the beginning of something very, very important. I'm very happy to be party to this program. Now, if I can see the poem, I will share it with you. I visited the site in Plymouth, the grave of these 4 black revolutionary soldiers. And this is not a rousing poem. It is a meditative piece, a reflection on history. Notes and thoughts at Partingways Cemetery. The sign reads, Partingways Cemetery. Here lie the graves of 4 Negro slaves, Kwame, Prince, Plato, Cato. These men fought in the Revolutionary War and were freed at its close. The cemetery is located in the original 94-acre lot deeded to them by the government when they were given their freedom. Manumission. Death, the great emancipator. The wind and rain are part of a wreath of wildflowers